Deion Sanders is enjoying his best baseball season. Will it end prematurely? Will he leave the Atlanta Braves at the end of July and concentrate on football? Or will Deion play both sports simultaneously? Will he race back and forth between the diamond and the gridiron? Is this his last year in a football uniform? With the Freeman McNeil free agency trial recessed for 2 weeks, amid rumors that the NFL wants to settle out of court, the spotlight is on two quarterbacks, Mark Rypien, who's threatening to leave the Washington Redskins, and Joe Montana, who's returned to the San Francisco 49ers. Imagine if they were all-star teammates, Tony Gwynn of the San Diego Padres and Cal Ripken of the Baltimore Orioles, joining Ken Griffey Jr. and the rest of baseball's superstars to give the United States another dream team in the Olympics.
The Sports Reporters with Dick Chap is presented by Levi's Doctors.
Good morning and welcome to the latest edition of the Sports Reporters. I'm Dick Schaap, and today we'll discuss those subjects and more with Sally Jenkins of Sports Illustrated, who said Andre Agassi would win a major title someday, Mike Lupica of the New York Daily News, who said Andre Agassi would never win a major title, and Bill Collin of the Philadelphia Daily News, who said both of them were wrong. And as a matter of fact, so were most other people. Bill, here's your chance for you to prove yourself right as usual, more than halfway through the baseball season. Who are your MVPs, Kirby and who?
Well, the obvious one in the National League is Barry Bonds at this point, but Fred the Crime Dog McGriff is having a monster year, and I like him. And as you suggest, and I don't like to take too many suggestions from you, Kirby Puckett so far in the American League.
Good, I'm glad you took one anyway. Michael?
Pretty dangerous pick there with Kirby, Dick, yeah. Kirby Puckett. And I will go with my favorite player, Deion Sanders in the National League, who I think has who was a very good player for the Braves when they were not a very good team earlier in the year, and I thought kept them going.
If he's MVP, what does that make Otis Nixon?
His backup?
Okay, his backup. Sally?
Okay, I'm gonna aggravate Bill Collin, which he loves first thing in the morning, by throwing out the name of Tom Glavine.
Oh, yeah, I mean...
Well, I mean, aggravated. I've been more aggravated at this time in the morning, and more aggravating. Yeah, Tom Glavine's nice, the guy who vanished in a hail of wet wash flag, humpback liners in the All-Star game.
Nice job, Tom.
And then got serious and pitched a shutout yesterday.
The All-Star game doesn't count as far as the National League's concerned anyway. They've lost 5 All-Star games in a row. They've lost 6 of the last 9 World Series. Would this indicate that the American League is stronger?
You know, I'm a National League guy and have been since 1965, but I've been saying for the last 5 to 8 years that the American League has caught up. You don't have to be a brilliant mathematician to figure out that every year with 2 extra clubs, they're signing about 150 more ball players than the National League is, and sooner or later, just the accumulation of this superiority of numbers is going to start trickling up.
So now
into
it should
the
start
lineups.
going the other way then, because
And they also have a different drafting philosophy. They are less speed conscious in the American League. Consequently, they've got more big, true home run type guys like Mark McGwire.
Can I just say that, you know, frequently there are statistics that are subject to misinterpretation. I don't think that this current streak here is one of them. I don't think there's any misinterpreting this one.
Well, you know, it's interesting how things happen this way in sports. You know, in football, they'll now talk about how the NFC has a certain type of player, and you're wondering, they're all drafting out of the same talent pool every year, but there becomes a mindset with different leagues, and I think that's happened now in baseball, and I think that this is something that's going to last, you know, into the next century.
And Mike, we're way past the black thing. There was a time when it was fashionable to say the National League had achieved dominance, winning all those All-Star games under Warren Giles and Chub Feeney, because they were much more active in the early procurement and development of black players. But that we're far enough.
That was true.
That was true, but now it's no longer.
Well, yeah, but how good can the National League be if this many Padres are on the team? You know,
Well,
think of it.
that's a fan vote thing, too. How about how many ex-Padres were on the team?
But remember the arrogance, Phil, that the National League players used to have, where they almost thought of the American League disdainfully, and it was sort of the end of your career you went to the American League.
Yeah, now the American League has that arrogance.
Yeah, do they have that?
But you just watched, and you just watched that game the other night, and all the guys you wanted to look at were on the American League team. I mean, you want to see Ripken, you know, you want to see guys.
The American League.
wanted to see guys who weren't there, like fielders.
The American League pioneered watching home runs. And the reason you can watch home runs in the American League is the pitchers don't have to hit. So the pitchers will knock you on your rear.
Even with the American League playing, so 11 of the 14 teams in the league, their attendance is down. The only ones that are up are Baltimore, Toronto, and Minnesota.
Mike had a few words in the newspaper about that today.
You can come up with, you know...
Is he your caddy?
No,
I just happened to read his paper.
You know, there's 4 teams that are down dramatically. You know, the Rangers and the Mets and the Dodgers, and I forget the other one. And there's a few that are up. Baltimore, you know, Baltimore's throwing off the attendance figures this year because they're up so dramatically. There's something going on in this country, and I don't know if this is a very ordinary baseball season, in my opinion. I think that the fan now, it costs a family of 4 $109 on the average to go to a baseball game.
Which is about half of what it costs to go to a basketball game.
But you know, there's something going on with a disaffected, angry baseball fan in this country, and I'm not sure the sport is addressing that as their #1 problem. They're worried about how much money they're going to get from CBS and NBC and cable this time around, and Vincent's worried about whether the Cubs belong in the West or the East. I have heard more baseball fans, more crazed baseball fans that I know this year say that they can't get in, and it's not just New York. There's something going on out there, and a lot of these people aren't coming back.
When you combine an economic recession with fan disenchantment, you're going to see 20% fall-offs in attendance, particularly on teams like the Mets.
You know, when you eliminate the trendy teams, Baltimore with the new stadium is a trendy team. The new has not yet worn off the White Sox new stadium. The Texas Rangers are going to be going into a new stadium, so they're going to ride that trendy wave where everybody wants to go. 2 new expansion teams next year are going to be, they're going to draw 2.5, 3 million in both of them because of the newness of Major League Baseball. But if you look around at the hardcore franchises, they're the ones that are losing, and they're the ones that baseball needs
all of a sudden in baseball,
look at very hard.
To be a big draw in baseball, all of a sudden you have to be a novelty item or turn your park into a theme park. I mean, that's what happened in Toronto. It's what's happening in Baltimore. But the core fan, and I think something else more dangerous to baseball is happening. I think they're starting to lose the kid fan. I think they're starting to lose kids.
The games are so long and they're so late.
The games are too long and too late is exactly right.
When do players ever act nicely toward the fans?
Well, you know, that's what I was going to say. As someone who is not an impassioned baseball fan to begin with, I've become totally alienated by A, the salaries, B, their behavior.
But
I'm sorry. I don't want to.
I mean, Barry Bonds was bragging to us the other day that you think I'm bad at signing autographs, you should see Van Slyke.
Hey, and then the fans see, you know, he hears Wade Boggs say, well, things would have been a lot different if I'd gotten my new contract before the season. Or Greg Maddux, who has never won 20 games in his life and may never win 20 games in his life, whose big statistical claim to fame is won 15 games in a row for 4 seasons, turns down $28 million.
How about your MVP, Deion Sanders? Now, how much should he get, you know, to give up football?
There's one good thing about Deion Sanders, and it's been discussed by, I heard Peter Gammon talking about this on ESPN, and I've heard baseball people. The one thing, the message that Deion Sanders would send if he stayed in baseball is, this is the kind of athlete that they have started to lose to other sports. You know, they started to lose the best athletes to football and basketball.
They've been losing, and it's been worse.
But this would, I think, send a little bit of a message that maybe baseball can now draw some of these kids back.
Yeah, well, it would behoove Atlanta to allow him to do exactly what he wants to do, because Deion Sanders is one of the few people that can get me, the Braves, one of the few who can get me to the ballpark. I'd go see a 2-sport Deion Sanders play baseball.
Unfortunately, that his ego will make him play both sports.
And since we have none of that here, we're happy to take a break, and we will return after these messages. We will salve our egos.
The Sports Reporters is presented by Levi's Dockers. Nobody does color like Dockers.
Shirts. Beware the man who says, I'll give you the shirt off my back. Chances are it's not a Docker shirt, and therefore of no great loss to him, nor of any particular gain to you. Nobody does shirts like Dockers.
you were here, he had the traveler's checks here. That is the problem. Well, was. Now there's American Express traveler's checks for two. The first checks either of you can use. Don't leave home without them.
Some days you just can't lose. Wanna live, wanna spread the news. Some days you feel so good. Gotta smile, gotta knock on wood.
A great day calls for a great beer. The Michelob beers, with its smooth, classic taste you don't find every day.
Michelob, some days. Michelob, some days. Michelob, some days are better than others.
Open your coat, please. Take that thing out slowly and open it.
Some kind of device. We have a possible situation.
No, wait, no, really.
We have a situation here.
Not a situation. Don't just touch the button quietly, please.
It's just like a car stereo.
Pioneer Car Stereos offer you a detachable face for the ultimate in security.
You see, it's a detachable space for the car stereo. No matter what these people are saying.
The Sports Reporters is brought to you by American Express Traveler's Checks for two at most places where our regular checks are sold. And by the Michelob family of beers, because some days are better than others.
Can you imagine the quarterback who won the last Super Bowl playing this season in Canada? Can you imagine the quarterback who won his first Super Bowl a decade ago trying to win his fifth next January? Mark Rypien and Joe Montana think those are real possibilities. What do you think, Sally?
Well, I think in the day of the mercenary in sports, anything is possible. And I also think, however, there are a few people here and there who remind us of why we still watch these games, and those are people like Joe Montana. And I've watched Joe Montana stand on his head, so I'll be happy to watch his attempt.
He'd probably get hurt doing it. I think Rypien proved last week, though, that he's not a threat to go on the golf tour.
No.
Yeah.
So did a handful of others.
At least that possibility.
Aren't those guys always frauds with this? I mean, don't you see Michael Jordan really on a Tuesday afternoon at his club, you know, hitting 4 balls out of bounds and just taking a double bogey on the scoreboard?
I was going to say, it turns out he's vastly overrated.
Yeah, they all talk a much better game.
I don't want to be the one to say this, but did you notice Lawrence Taylor's scores? I mean, would you like to go tell him that he's a fraud on the golf course?
I'm going to get the opportunity this week.
You know,
somebody has to do it.
We're into me. Just absolutely the worst time in sports is when all the word out of the NFL camps is that, well, negotiations have stalled with this guy, negotiations. The Norman Brayman's still in France. Nothing will happen until he comes back. And then all of a sudden they're going to start playing the exhibition. They're all going to be signed. They're all going to be out there. Rypien's going to be playing for the Redskins. Everybody's going to be playing for who they're supposed to be playing for. It happens every year.
But I do hope that the one story for me this year is Montana coming back.
Story.
I mean, this is the greatest player.
And not with a knuckleball, I hope.
No, I don't think.
Fastball.
You know what? Knowing him a little bit, you know, he's not going to come back with a knuckleball. That if he doesn't think he can do it, he won't be back there. But I think he saw what happened with understudies last year and saw the possibilities of that team at the end of the season. I mean, the Super Bowl that wasn't was the Redskins against the 49ers in the playoffs. And if Montana comes all the way back from this, that's whatever happens in football this year, that's the number one story.
But can they win? Are they good enough to win with Bono and Young?
I think that, well, before I address that, if Joe Montana just brazens it out, he's better than 3/4 of the quarterbacks around anyway. You know, I don't care what he throws. He can throw a dying quail, and he's still a better quarterback.
He might not be better than 3/4 of the quarterbacks on his own team.
Well, you know...
with 75% of his skill.
Except that the 49ers want to play for Joe Montana. I'm not so sure if they were given a choice between Montana and the other guys, they pick Young or Bono. They want to play with Joe Montana still.
Well, how about in Philadelphia? How much is the change going to be there with Cunningham back, with Herschel Walker added, and of course with the death?
Well, the thing that encourages me is that Herschel Walker's, Mike Lupica's good friend Herschel Walker is apparently being fitted to an offense which will utilize his multiple skills.
Oh, God,
they're running a lot of sets where
they're going to have bobsledding.
Yeah, right.
What, taekwondo?
They're going to have Byers, who's a great big kind of slow guy who is more like a guard than a running back, leading some plays for him. It looks like they're going to have a little more straight ahead blocking on the offensive line and not so much fancy stuff. And they're putting in kind of a multiple offense And that shows me that at least Rich Kotite is using a little imagination, which is something the Minnesota Vikings totally failed to do.
He's a good coach. He's a good coach and a good guy, Richie Kotite. And if anybody can get this guy to produce, it will be him. Unlikely as
You're
I
saying
believe.
that. Untuck that tongue.
What about New York? Are the Giants going to trade Sims?
No, I think Sims at some point this season will be the quarterback again.
We both thought that last season.
Yeah, but just because Ray hands-on Hanley, he says he's going to be more hands-on, and golly, isn't that good news for Giant fans, says there's no quarterback controversy this year, doesn't mean there isn't going to be one if Jeff Hostetler doesn't do the job. I think the Giants, as constituted, are moving into a long, dark tunnel. I think that the Jets are going to be the more attractive team in town for the next stretch of time. I don't think the Giants are better than the Eagles. I don't see how anybody would think that they're better than the Redskins. They're certainly not better than the Cowboys. I don't see how they can finish higher than fourth this year.
They can measure up to the Cardinals. We will take a break. When we come back, we will talk about the Olympic Games starting next Saturday.
On most airlines, business travelers usually buy an unrestricted coach ticket and get this seat. So what's the difference? With Continental's A fare, the same ticket gets you this seat. That's the difference.
I'm Officer Lisa Hale, Vice President of the Crime Prevention Association of Michigan. This year, over 1.5 million motor vehicles will be stolen. Stolen from shopping centers, workplaces, even from your own driveways. As a police officer, it's my duty to protect you as well as your personal possessions. So if you don't want your car or truck to be stolen, here are a few tips to remember. 1. Always remove your keys from the ignition. 2. Double check to make sure that your doors are locked. 3. At night, park in a well-lit area. 4. Never leave packages or personal belongings exposed on seats. And 5, never leave your car without first protecting it with the club. The club is a tough-tempered steel bar that can't be cut. Once attached, it makes driving your car virtually impossible. I personally use and recommend the club to help prevent auto thefts. It's affordable protection that you can't afford to be without. Remember to avoid cheap imitations. Make sure the anti-theft device you buy says the club on the handle.
The club's available at most stores where auto supplies are sold.
Yes, if I had a second chance and could choose to be a politician or go into sports writing, not playing, but writing, I would have taken writing. Writing, commentating, or whatever.
Coming up after the sports reporters, a look at Mike Utley's gallant struggle to live life on his own terms. A review of Riddick Bowe's tune-up for a title shot. And a preview of today's NASCAR Pocono 500. It's all straight ahead on SportsCenter.
Hotel accommodations provided by Novotel, New York, the hotel with the European touch in the heart of New York City.
The 1992 Olympic Games begin Saturday in Barcelona, and the hottest ticket in town is to see the Dream Team, to see Magic and Larry and Michael and Charles. And Mike Lupica, what about a dream team in baseball? Should we send the Rocket and all those people over there for that?
Yeah, I'm not one of those people who believes that our Olympic mandate is to send a team over there so we can send a message to the rest of the world.
That we invented the game.
Yeah, I saw some of the baseball players being interviewed this week talking about how, well, we could, one time we could show them who's boss. When did that become the spirit of the game?
Besides, isn't one sports My Lai massacre enough for the century?
Yeah, but don't you think maybe the baseball players heard that the basketball team was spending a week
And there's another factor. Will Clark was quoted as saying, oh, yeah, can you see us against Peru? Well, for one thing, Peru doesn't play in the Olympic baseball tournament, but Cuba does.
Will Clark
and I've covered this Cuba team ever since Indianapolis in 1987. And they are good, and they've got an infield that could play First Division Major League Baseball anywhere, led by Omar Linares. They have the second-best second baseman on the planet, Antonio Pacheco. They're good, and as you know, baseball is a hot pitcher's game, and as Will Clark and those guys found out against Japan in Los Angeles, one tough left-hander can end it for you.
You could ask you could stump Will Clark by asking him what continent Peru is on.
The Peruvians have been getting bad inkers lately. But wouldn't they have to? Oh, I'm sorry. But since they do play basketball, which is a winter game basically, in the Summer Olympics, shouldn't they put baseball into the Winter Olympics?
You know, there might be an opportunity to do this in the next Pan Am Games, which I am told may be held during the wintertime because Buenos Aires is right.
You know, there's an interesting trend going on in this country where every time something starts to get a little too competitive for our taste, we change the boundaries of the playing field all of a sudden.
Do you think, do either one of you think that this would have happened with the Dream Team if we'd sent anybody other than John Thompson to coach at Seoul and the American team had won the gold medal in Seoul, which they should have, and would there have been this backlash that we had to go over one time?
It is important to remember, though.
It's the bully in the playground saying, I don't like the fact that you're winning, so I'm taking my ball, and we're going to go over
it is the rest of the world that insisted that we bring NBA players rather than the U.S. The U.S. Basketball Association was against
like you said last week, they want to take the pictures. But the British Empire had a name for what we're doing right now back in Queen Victoria's day. It's let's go off and kill the wogs.
God, I get so uneasy.
How about some of the other stories in the Olympics? What do you think will come out of it? What are you looking for?
Well, you know, I always look for the surprise of the Summer Olympics. I always look for, I mean, there's all kinds of glamour events. There's the gymnastics, there's the, the 100-meter dash. I like the kayaking and the Greco-Roman wrestling. I'm looking for the the amateur, the genuinely amateur athlete to win a gold medal and do one thing in one moment that will sustain him or her for the rest of their
I like
their
seeing
life.
the team handball team.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I want to see Kim Zemeskel and Nellie Bayanskaya, or whatever her name is, do the drop-dead stare at each other on the medal stand.
You always end up finding that even you know nothing about gymnastics going in, and there will be this year's girl, and then this year's girl will capture the imagination. And other than that, I like to watch Biondi swim because it seems like he gets there in 3 strokes. I don't know how the guy does that.
Well, he's 7'8". We'll take a break now. We'll be back after these messages. Coming up, Conlon says the gymnast was gypped. Lupica says Bradley still shines in the garden. And Jenkins says, stop abusing Agassi.
Blue. A color that reached for the sky and got it. Dignified. Versatile. Always proper. Blue, the color of choice for every ocean and Royal Navy. And nobody does blue like Dockers.
There's a tropical island that's not on any map, though it's easy to find. It's warmed by the sun and caressed by the winds, with its own hidden treasures, local delicacies, and exotic festivals. But this island moves. It's a Carnival cruise ship. So if you go, get there on time and get out your Visa card. Because Carnival cruise ships don't stay in one place for long, and they don't take American Express. Visa, it's everywhere you want to be.
Now, it's time for parting shots.
And Bill Conlon fires first.
It didn't take long for Bella Caroli. It didn't take Bella Caroli long to become the Nick Bollettieri of Munchkin Gymnastics. All he needed was a green card and a storefront, and the gold medals started pouring in. Well, there's also such a thing as decency and the right thing, even in Munchkin Gymnastics, and that was withheld. Kim Kelly, a Philadelphia area gymnast who finished 6th in the national championships, which should have qualified her for the Olympic team. But no, Bella Caroli, insisted on a second chance for one of his gymnasts. They did a second deal, and as a result, Kim Kelly was bumped from the team. Shame on you, Bella.
Michael.
In 1968, Bill Bradley took a drive down to Philadelphia one summer night to test himself in the Baker League and played a now legendary basketball game against Earl Monroe. And Monroe remembers that early in the game, there was this little spin move from Bradley that surprised him, and Earl remembers smiling and thinking, oh, because Bill Bradley wanted to find out how he did against the best. 24 years later, Earl was in the Garden the other night as Bill Bradley gave one of the keynote addresses for the Democratic National Convention. Now, I don't know if Bradley was exactly testing himself against the best that night, but it was a unique moment, I think, not only for sports, but for politics. Bill standing under his retired jersey and giving what I thought was a wonderful speech. I could have lost the wiggle wobble and waiver, but it was a tremendous speech. Everybody always said Bill Bradley was going to be president. Maybe he started the other night. I hope so. But afterwards, he said, I've had bigger nights at the Garden. I'm not sure anybody in the Democratic Convention last week could make the same statement.
Good spin move. Sally?
Well, you know, for years now, I've been coming on this show defending the honor of little Andre Agassi against the cheap shots of my colleagues. And, you know, I considered coming on today just for the purpose of saying, I told you so. Because 2 weeks ago, Andre Agassi won Wimbledon, of all things. So, you know, I've decided, however, I'm too large and generous of a person to say to Mike Lupica, I told you so. To say to Bill Collins, I told you so. To say at home to John Feinstein, I told you so.
Wiggle, waggle, wobble.
I'll have a parting shot of my own in a couple of minutes, but first a reminder, the King joins us on Shap Talk Tuesday, a chance for you to talk to Richard Petty, approaching the end of his reign over NASCAR racing. Join in and call in Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time here on ESPN.
The Sports Reporters is brought to you by Pioneer Electronics, innovators of detachable face security to protect your car stereo.
You were here. He has the traveler's checks here. Uh-oh. Well, now there's American Express traveler's checks for two. The first checks either of you can use. Don't leave home without them.
Not long ago at Subway headquarters, our founder, Fred, had a good idea. Why not take the best part of a chicken, that being the breast, cook it the best possible way, that being slow oven roasting, and serve it on the best bread around, that being Subway's fresh baked bread. The result, the new sliced roast chicken breast sandwich. A sandwich fit for a king. And since our chicken's 93% fat-free, it's fit for fit kings, too.
For more information on the new sliced roast chicken breast sandwich, visit the Subway near you.
When a muffler goes, some people look for a cheap replacement. They think it costs less. Fact is, they can get a quality Midas muffler starting at $24.95. Fact is, a guaranteed economizer muffler starting at $24.95. Fact is, installed by experts starting at $24.95. So when somebody says they have a cheaper muffler than Midas, they're right. When they say they're better, fact is, they're wrong. Don't believe anybody ever beats Midas.
Now you can own the best of Sports Center on home video, featuring superstars, amazing plays, wacky bloopers. Now on home video.
The Sports Reporters is presented by Levi's Dockers. Nobody does color like Dockers.
Thousands of sports reporters will flock to Barcelona this week to cover the Olympics. And all of us should keep in mind that no matter how good we think we are, we've got a tough act to follow. Remember, Homer covered the ancient games in Greece, and Arthur Conan Doyle covered the 1908 games in London. It is horrible yet fascinating, this struggle between a set purpose and an utterly exhausted frame, Arthur Conan Doyle wrote of the marathon in London. But just in case any one of us starts to think we're more important than the athletes, it was Plutarch who wrote, Themistocles, being asked whether he would rather be Achilles or Homer, said, which would you rather be, a conqueror in the Olympic Games or the crier that proclaims who are conquerors? Well, I'll be among the criers in Barcelona for the next 2 weeks, and my friend Bob Lipsyte of the New York Times will be hosting the Sports Reporters. Please join Bob next Sunday. Robin, we couldn't get Homer or Arthur Conan Doyle.
No, you couldn't get Homer, so you got a homeboy there in New York.
You said it. His last name is not Simpson.
I'll take the credit. Well, you got a little more work to do before you head off to Barcelona. We'll see you in a few minutes, Dick. Because of our live coverage of the Pocono 500 at the top of the hour, we'll only be with you for half an hour, but our plate is still full.